Hi, I'm Dr. Kevin Mailo, one of the co-hosts of the Physician Empowerment Podcast. At Physician Empowerment, we're dedicated to improving the lives of Canadian physicians, personally, professionally, and financially. If you're loving what you're listening to, let us know. We always want to hear your feedback. Connect with us. If you want to go further, we've got outstanding programming, both in person and online. So look us up. But regardless, we hope you really enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Mailo with the Physician Empowerment Podcast, and I'm joined today by Dr. Iuliaa Povieriena. And Iuliaa is part of our lifetime masterclass. So she joined earlier this year and has really brought so much to the physician empowerment community in terms of this perspective on well-being. And as you use the term, Iuliaa, living authentically. So I'm just going to go with a bit of a running introduction here, and then of course we'll dive into today's topic. But you're a hospitalist based in Ontario, and I know we've introduced you on the show before because you've been here. But you do so much in terms of this living better, like truly flourishing now, which I find so personally inspiring. And you have a YouTube channel now, and you're producing, videos across multiple topics from physical health to psychological and spiritual health. But go ahead and tell us a little bit about what we're going to be covering today.
Thank you, Kevin, for an introduction. Today, I think will be a topic that maybe a lot of people thought about and considered doing, but had things in their way that maybe stopped them from trying, or maybe they tried before and it didn't go well. So I wanted to address a topic of mindfulness and meditation and practices that bring peace to us as one of the building blocks to physician wellness and generally just being at peace as a human. I thought this could be a good beginning for us starting talking about emotional wellness.
I think it's great. And we decided that I think we're going to call this part of the podcast, the you as the most important investment. If you've come to physician empowerment events, going back to the very beginning, 2016, when we started, we always had a few slides. We started with a few slides on you as the most important investment. Because frankly, money is truly secondary to each of us thriving personally and professionally. And my own personal belief is that when we are thriving personally and at our healthiest physically, mentally, emotionally, that is when really prosperity comes in so many perspectives, in so many ways, whether it's, relationships, financial health, career success. It starts with self. So today we're going to be talking about mindfulness. And so, Iuliaa, tell me in your words what's mindfulness, because it's everywhere now. But tell me what it really means to you.
You're right. There's so many definitions, and every year we see more and more books on this. And I wanted to actually go back to what you just said about the most important investment. And I like that we're starting with mindfulness because this is a low cost, low time commitment investment that we all can do every day, or maybe not even every day, that will compound over time into tremendous benefits. Out of all definitions that I've came across, I think the one that sticks best to me or conglomerated in my mind is observing what's present in the moment without judgment or expectation. So that state of observation and almost noticing the observer in yourself, seeing that thinker. This is more of a complicated way of looking at it, but in this nutshell, it is just being accepting of the moment without expecting it to be different or resisting of what's there in the moment, in the present moment.
So without this, we tend to get an emotional response when we're faced with something good or bad in our environment, or if a thought comes into our head, there's an emotion tied to it. But what you're getting at is, if I'm understanding correctly, is a bit more of an objective perspective, that you're just there to observe what's occurring in the environment, or that thought that's going through one's mind.
Yeah, and you can have emotions, but instead of being attached to the emotion and being carried away and completely overwhelmed by it, you could be like, "Huh, oh, I'm experiencing anger." And all of a sudden, it's you experiencing anger rather than I'm angry, and you're more embodied by this anger. You can step away, step outside of it a little bit and notice that you're experiencing anger and how it feels maybe in your body or what thoughts are showing up. Huh, I'm having this thought. And that's that's being mindful, being able to recognize or be aware of what are the thoughts, what are the feelings, what are the sensations that are happening in the moment. And sometimes it's even building that awareness of your own breath. That's what it often starts with. The things we often just kind of let go on autopilot and don't notice is, you hear that we all have such a busy life that a lot of it is mindless. We drive, we have so many thoughts in our mind. We take a shower, we go through our to-do list, shopping list, and we rehearse the conversations that happened 2 days ago. We don't notice how we take that shower, or we don't notice the beautiful drive, or we don't notice the taste of the food that we're having for dinner because we're so absorbed in either the past or the future worries. And they kind of run our present and really rob us of the present moment.
Yeah, because I think for us, especially as physicians, we're always thinking about, okay, well, what do I have to do to get through the next hour or the rest of the day? And it's that constant, like you said, that future trap of, I'm just stuck in what's next, what's next, what's next,
Yeah.
without sitting and observing one's emotions.
And with patience too. I think mindfulness has been really helpful for me to, and for some other people I know, to relate to patients. Because if you're fully attend, and there's a book called Attending by a New York physician, that his name is escaping me, but it talks about being fully present and mindfully listening to your patients without thinking what you're going to say next, or all the red flags you have to run through when they finish talking, or your next patient or your previous patient, or the admin issue that's on your mind, and just letting it all go behind the door. Once you step in, you're fully present with that person and you're listening with the open mind without trying to judge or predict what they're going to say. You just listen, and you notice your thoughts are popping, and because you're noticing them, it becomes a little bit easier to let them go and still refocus on the conversation, on what that patient has to say. So professionally, it's also very profoundly
And I
effective.
think it's worth stopping there and saying, and this isn't just about having the so-called better patient encounter, right? Like,
Yeah, no.
like, obviously your patients are going to benefit from this, but it's even settling in the moment and realizing that you enjoy your job more when you are present. Because this is it. This is medicine. It's a human business. For the vast majority of us, we are interacting with patients constantly, and their families. And yes, a lot of the time, like when we're time pressured, it's like, okay, we'll just get through the history, get through the exam, and get going with a plan. But like, you can't have that really define your career, because you're just going to look back and see like day after day of, these busy patient encounters. And I think this is applicable like to us, regardless of where we practice. Even in the emergency department myself, like I work very hard to just sit down on the stool next to the patient and listen. Not that that happens all the time in the chaos of the emergency department, but trying to have even one of those, or a few of those really great encounters during the day, leaves me energized in my practice, right? And I've watched great surgeons do it, internists do it, family doctors do it, and it's profound, because it's a centering in our practices where we're doing the human business of medicine. We're not technicians.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. It really makes my job so much more rewarding. And I agree with you.
And you're a busy hospitalist, so it is relevant. So,
But it starts with cultivating that for yourself. I did this be a not to serve others better. I think initially in the first place, I think I was struggling to connect with myself better, or maybe cope with what I was challenged by the busyness and the overwhelming nature of the profession and the life that comes with it, the lifestyle that follows. I think we all experience this.
I think that's very fair. And again, there's something coming out here as I'm hearing you, Iuliaa, is this idea that there is a mindfulness of the world outside of us. It could be family, spouses, patients, coworkers or colleagues, that whole environment, even just strangers on the street. But true mindfulness starts with the inner environment and connecting with self. Like, why am I feeling tension today when I haven't even started the day? Would be a good exploration, for instance.
Or not even why, but even just like,
I am.
I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this.
That's a good point.
Not getting into even entangled into trying to rationalize and explain and why, and just like noticing it. And then sometimes just being able to take a step outside of it allows you to leave it. But that's not even the point or not the purpose. The point is just to notice and don't judge it. It's not about you. Oh, I'm all of a sudden why am I starting my day tensed or stressed or anxious? Is this going to run my day like this? Like you can go on a tangent and catastrophize this in many different ways. It's just about, okay, and just accepting it and moving on. And I'm not perfect at this for sure. Even the mindful listening, when I listen to my husband, a lot of the times he will say I'm the worst listener at times, right? So nobody is perfect. And it's always a practice and a journey. And some days and practices are perceived as better, but all of them our mindfulness practices, which I thought is very important to bring up, is that people think that I will suck at mindfulness. I just can't sit still. I just can't clear my mind of thoughts. I will always be anxious and all sorts of things, but nobody is an expert in it, really, and nobody is perfect.
And I think that's another key part of mindfulness is this is a multi-year journey. And for some who take it very seriously, it's a lifetime's journey. And I don't look at that as a downside or a negative. It's no different than fitness or eating right or becoming a better doctor as we go through the years of our career. It's all a journey. But developing that self-awareness is one of the best gifts we can give ourselves and to those around us, frankly. And so it creates a lot of space when you look at it from that perspective, I think, to be kind to oneself. So yeah, you have a slip up and you're like, okay, I was in my head. I wasn't listening to what my spouse said. Or, I wasn't really present during that patient encounter. I was thinking about, the next patient I got to go see. And so just pausing, being like, but being kind to yourself, that there are people that practice mindfulness for a lifetime and still feel like they have much to learn.
Yes. In fact, I've listened to some of the interviews of the gurus of mindfulness, like Chris Germer, Tara Brach, and they often say that they have those thoughts too of judging themselves that they suck at mindfulness because they have the thoughts popping in and they can't sit still and all that stuff. It's very normal. It's just part of being human and it's part of our humanity, which actually brings us to we touched on a point about mindfulness practices. And I think a lot of people think that mindfulness is sitting in a lotus pose for an hour every day and completely having thought-free mind, holding mudras, being dressed like a monk, It's not that. It could be in any position, sitting, laying, standing, anything that allows you to be awake and present. And it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes. There are books and podcasts and apps now that offer various length and duration of practices, and they still work. The 3-minute breathing space is the one you can find on YouTube. Actually, really easy to follow and quite profound exercise that I personally did for a couple of years, and that's all I could tolerate. Mm, It doesn't have to be what maybe some of the social media kind of paints it to, that you have to be like almost like a yogi to do this. But there are also many types of mindfulness practices that are not labeled as meditation. So, for example, guided visualization practice or progressive muscle relaxation or metta meditations, loving kindness practice. There are so many different types of practices that you can do depending on what the challenge for the day, so to say. Not everybody will find that doing a body scan or breathing exercise is what serves them best that day. So I wanted to just invite people to explore what kind of calls to them better, or just maybe try different ones and see which speaks to them the most.
Yeah. And again, I think that's the other big realization for me is that there are many manifestations of mindfulness. There are many ways to do this. And it's kind of no different than like when we do financial education and physician empowerment, we teach there are many paths to financial security. You don't have to follow a formula. There are some key components you need to get right, but you don't have to be super prescriptive, because I think a lot of us who are feeling tired or burnt out working in our practices don't want one more should,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So be kind to yourself and use this as an opportunity to say, okay, maybe there's something here that I can take that works in my busy life that is going to make me happier and healthier without trying to, per se keep up with so-called experts in the space.
Yeah. Exactly. And in medicine as well, we don't there's no like two different cardiologists may prescribe slightly different treatment to the same patient. There's no one, it's almost like there's no one unique or universal way to do anything. Eat, sleep, exercise, nothing is it's only the thing that's going to work for you in your own unique situation is the right thing for you. And only you will know. And this might change a year, 5 years, or 10 years from now, because life is always changing. At some points of your life, you might find that self-compassion practices would be the best ones. Kristen Noff has a 5-minute self-compassion break on Insight Timer. It's a free app, which could really help you deal with maybe a difficult encounter or something you feel you're beating yourself up for. Or if you're very stressed, you might find that progressive muscle relaxation also helps you anchor on that breath, anchor on those muscle tension sensation, and kind of release a little bit of that swirl of your thoughts.
And what would you say, practically speaking, is useful for any of us to bring mindfulness into our day?
Okay, so in terms of practical application, if you're thinking about how to start, like how to begin with
Yeah,
that
yeah. Like for instance, my big one, my pain point is time.
time.
I feel like some days I get up and I'm just going. How do I find even a few minutes of space?
Okay. So I would just habit stack it. To be honest, it's just a matter of deciding and committing to where in your day you're willing to realistically put in 1, 3, 5, 10 minutes. What is it that you want to do? Some people go the hard way and they actually take a course like MBSR, which actually makes you do a 45 minutes meditation twice a day. And then you obviously will slip a few times and you'll feel guilty. So that's an extreme. But a lot of the times it's just, okay, I can stick to 3 minutes a day and let me try this for 2 weeks and see what happens. and when is the window in your day that you would be most successful to do this. So for me, I habit stack it with my evening routine, so to say. After I go brush my teeth in the evening, I do journaling. And after I do that, before bed, I sneak in my meditation. And on the days when I'm super tired and I'm just about to drop dead, nothing competes with sleep. I will fall asleep during meditations anyway. So people say, "Oh, meditation makes me sleepy." Yes, it will if you're sleep deprived, and that's a message you should pay attention to. If it comes to you sleep or you meditate, you sleep. That's it. It's a non-negotiable. So you have to let it go sometimes. That's fine. You are being kind to yourself. It's all about cultivating that kindness and trying to maybe do it next day. Like, the Atomic Habit author, he said, if you're trying to build a new habit, you're allowed to slip, but try to maybe not sleep for more than 2 to 3 days in a row. But I would say if you're so sleep deprived that you just can't get out of it for a few days, so it be.
I like that. It was really something that, yeah, like if you're falling asleep, it's a message that you need sleep,
Mhm.
very interesting. And I was even just, thinking as you were talking, but, I'm a voracious consumer of audiobooks and I enjoy, medical podcasts and things, but sometimes if I'm listening, I feel like I'm in my head. I stop and I go, oh, I'm not listening to the podcast anymore. And somebody might not be listening to us talking right now because they're thinking about something else. And that's a sign that the mind is too cluttered,
Yeah.
and there are all those cues telling you where you should be focusing your well-being energy.
And just by noticing this, you are already being mindful. So mindfulness is not only about a formal practice where you go into a quiet environment where you won't be interrupted, you put your phone on silent, and you sit in a certain position and you turn it on an app. It could be as brief as when you're washing your hands. You just take a few breaths and you notice them. And I know it sounds almost trivial, but if you do it for a few times consistently, and if you have some even occasional practice of 5 to 10, 3 minutes, sometimes sprinkled through your weeks, you start to condition to that state. It becomes much easier to come back to that awareness state on a much quicker notice. So even when you set an intention, I'm just going to wash my hands and pay attention to my sensations, to the temperature of the water, the smells, maybe the light, or what's going through my body. Even for that brief moment of 30 seconds, that's already a break for your nervous system. Because I wonder that the purpose of all of this is actually to just give your nervous system a break from being in that sympathetic nervous system state where you are all in your thoughts, all activated, and just activate the parasympathetic nervous system, even for a brief moment. And even if you sit and meditate for 10 minutes, you are not going to be instantly relaxed, and you may not even get relaxed in the whole 10 minutes, and that's absolutely fine. Or you could get like a split second, and I think that's already a win. But if you don't chase that goal and you just let it happen without expectation, eventually it will be like a side effect of mindfulness practices. But it's not, if you put it as an ultimate goal, it will be so hard. It's like you're chasing your tail. It won't be happening. You will get frustrated. If you don't expect anything and you just observe, you will develop that subtle ability to just shift attention to the breath or your body, and that will kind of bring that instant calm sometimes.
Just to expand further on that slowing, right? When you talk about washing your hands, this really resonated with me, having done some reading and exploration of Buddhist thought and philosophy and the power of small tasks in our lives, because our lives are filled with small tasks that are not necessarily psychologically or intellectually stimulating, but those can actually be used as moments to pause, right? Like if you have to go do something out in the yard, for instance, there's always this feeling like, oh, well, I should rush through this so that I'm done this unpleasant task. But is it truly unpleasant? Like in my department, if I have to print some piece of paper and it goes to the front of the department and I'm in the back and I have to walk, there is a perspective of like, okay, well, this is inefficient. And now I got to hurry and scurry to the front of the department, grab that paper, grab that prescription, run it back. But why don't I just take that as actually a moment to slow and be present in the moment? You sit there, doing something around the household, or you're having to drive a distance and you feel like, okay, well, I got to be as efficient as possible and get through this. It's like, well, is there a rush? Can I not go slower and drive in silence with no radio, no music, just drive in silence? And so there's a million moments in a day where we can create more space, at least in my own perspective, to go slower. Because you really shouldn't look back on your day and be like, well, all I did was run.
Yeah, and this reminds me of a tip from Mom to God. And one of her talks, she said, when you're late for an event or something, you're stuck in traffic, you could sit there for being frustrated and kind of be in that scattered mind state, versus you could kind of treat it as a gift of time, that you have time now to maybe think about something or just relax. You can't change the situation, but you can use this opportunity to breathe. And I do that when something doesn't work in the hospital, like a printer or EMR get frozen, and it's frustrating at the first glance, but then you think, I guess that's like a 20-second gift for myself to just recoup.
I love it. So, are there some resources? I mean, because obviously we are not covering mindfulness in a single episode. And I really hope we can come back to this. It's just, we're here to simply introduce its power into our personal and professional lives. But are there some resources or teachings that are really near and dear to your heart, Iuliaa, that you found most useful?
Yes, I really enjoy reading Kristen Neff. I know she's more in the self-compassion space, but it is inseparable from mindfulness. Gurman, Tara Brach books. There's also a book called Mind Illuminated, which I think has a really good way of explaining how our mind works. It's written by I want to say a psychiatrist who is a monk. Those would be probably the starting points. And if you are looking for a read from a physician perspective, there's a book called Attending, which covers it really, really well as well, and how it applies to our profession and how mindfulness can impact us in a positive way. But it's experiential. In a nutshell, you can read a lot about mindfulness, but really all you need is go ahead and start trying. You can read 10,000 books and still not sit for a minute practicing it. So it's not about understanding the resources or didactically trying to wrap your head around it. It's just experiencing.
So I'm hearing some key themes here. Number one is carve time out in your day, and it doesn't have to be a lot, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'm also hearing lots of space for self-forgiveness. And you mentioned earlier before we recorded about this notion of a puppy. And I know we're wrapping up today's, interview, but tell me about this puppy analogy with one's wandering thoughts.
Oh, yeah. So, one of the tips for the wandering mind, which we all will have, is looking at your mind that wandered away from the meditation. Let's say you're doing a guided practice, body scan, or breathing exercise, and you notice you are already so deep dive in your thoughts. So instead of beating yourself up, imagine and look at your mind as a puppy, like a little cutest puppy you can imagine. And instead of beating the puppy and being angry at it or being harsh and judgmental and saying, "Oh, you're the worst puppy. You're the most silly puppy there." You wouldn't do that. You would gently, gently, gently guide it back, because it's just a little innocent puppy. That's all it's do. It's there to explore, right? That's what our minds do. So if you imagine your mind being a puppy, that might be helpful way for you to be treating yourself a little bit kinder in the moments of those frustrations when you feel like you're failing in quotation marks at meditating.
I love that. I love that. So I really hope we can get you back on the show to explore more of these kinds of topics, because this is just so powerful. And this is not about being more efficient or productive. I really struggle with those terms. And I think most of us who have heard me speak, hear me rant about this. It's about being happier now. Because the challenge is to be like, if I always say to myself, if I'm not happy and thriving now, when is that point ever going to come in my life? So it's small things that we can do in our daily lives, in our practices, to simply be happier and healthier. And the rest follows later. So again, I really want to thank you for coming on the show, Iuliaa. And thank you for sharing your experience in this, because I know you have done so much and read so much. And I think for those of us here, we sometimes feel it's a little overwhelming or obscure, but this makes it very, very practical. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Physician Empowerment Podcast. If you're ready to take those next steps in transforming your practice, finances, or personal well-being, then come and join us at physempowerment.ca, PHYS empowerment.ca, to learn more about how we can help. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you would share our podcast with a colleague or friend, and head over to Apple Podcasts to give us a 5-star rating and review. If you've got feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episode topics, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to join us and be interviewed and share some of your story, we'd absolutely love that as well. Please send me an email at kmilo@physempowerment.ca. Thank you again for listening. Bye.